see if it comes down. First one, what's happening? Okay, so on the Microsoft side of things, Microsoft has announced new data centers are being opened in South Africa. So there'll be two new data centers basically in South Africa that will service the African continent, and again indicates the investment that Microsoft's making in its data center rollout. And they are the first data centers, whether they AWS or whatever, that are in South Africa. Our next item is that Microsoft announced the Windows Creator Fall, so Fall in the US update. Basically, it's another set of features and enhancements that we should see soon for the Windows 10. If you're on the Windows 10 Insider program, you can also get access to a lot of this stuff right now. So if you want to have a look at the features that Microsoft is going to add shortly for everybody, then dive into the Insider program. Now, Microsoft's announcement of the Creator Fall date came from the Build conference aimed at developers, but there certainly was a number of very interesting items, and I would commend you to have a look at the keynote, especially the first day. A lot of good IT Pro stuff in there. Something that is interesting, I suppose, is what they call Story Remix. So if you've worked with the product Sway, so Sway allows you basically to put in your content and then for it to make arrangements and to arrange the data and the fonts and the displays for you, rather than getting granular like you can in PowerPoint. Story Remix allows you to do the same sort of thing with video. So one of the examples they used was they were able to get Story Remix to track a soccer ball and then automatically put a graphic on top of it. So again, a nice little handy little tool to play with if you need to do some graphics and videos. Another one they talked about and showed was timeline. So you are now able, with the Creators Update, to basically get a listing of the files you've been working on over time. So it will keep a feed of the documents that you have been working with over time, allow you to roll back to those quickly and easily in a timeline. And the good thing is that will be available across your different Windows 10 devices. So as you move from device to device to device, you'll be able to see your timeline and be able to pick up from where you left off. And mentioning the ability to work between devices, Microsoft has also announced a cloud-powered clipboard. So if you copy and paste, so if you copy from one Windows 10 machine, you can then paste to another device. So a handy little add-on, and we expect to see those in the Windows Creator Fall update. Excuse me. All right, so let's talk about some Office 365 stuff. So one of the key things I think Microsoft recently announced was the adoption content pack for Power BI. So basically what this does, it allows you to connect to the analytics of Office 365 and report in Power BI. So basically what that means is that all the back-end analytics, all the logs, all that sort of stuff basically can be surfaced now in Power BI. Just excuse me. Can now be surfaced in Power BI. So you can go in and you can query things like how many people are using Skype for Business, how much data is being put into SharePoint, and that information will update regularly. So currently in preview, but will obviously roll out, but it's available to you. Again, there's a URL there that you can pop in and have a look. No cost to that. Nice, easy add-on for your Office 365 environment, and helps you get a better idea of exactly what users are doing in basically your environment. Alright, so another thing Microsoft announced, and they updated that today, is there is a Planner app now not only for iOS but also now for Android. So that was in preview when I created these slides, but is now in GA for iOS and Android. So Planner is a service in Office 365. It's typically linked to your teams and your groups, allows you to do management of tasks, and now there is a dedicated app on the iOS and Android platform. So again, just go into those devices, do a search for Microsoft Planner, put it on your machines and have a look at it. So again, means that Microsoft is enabling the services in Office 365 on the mobile devices, which is very important because in today's environment, very much the desktop is becoming more and more mobile. All right, so another big thing Microsoft had since we've had our last webinar was they had a SharePoint virtual conference here. Now, they had one the year before. They announced a lot of updates and improvements to SharePoint. This one, again, gives us an indication of where SharePoint's going, the new features that they're adding. So one of the examples we've got here that they have been adding is the integration with Power Apps directly into SharePoint sites. Now, Power Apps allows you to capture information in forms. The way that that was delivered typically was on top of a mobile shim. So basically you ran Power Apps as a mobile device and you then ran your forms on top of that. Microsoft is now enabling that ability to run and embed directly in SharePoint sites, as you can see in this screen capture here. So that's going to make it much easier to create custom forms, to integrate information, and basically use the list ability as a back end into creating an interactive SharePoint. There's also some new, I suppose, team sites called communication sites. So typically what we see in SharePoint is that team sites are either collaboration, documents, lists that people work on, or the communication sites, which are normally publishing sites. So they're the traditional intranet sites where you publish information like a web page out to people. So Microsoft is releasing what they call communication sites. It makes it much easier to create these sort of intranet style sites and push them out to your users. So again, all of these updates are rolling out in the very near future to all tenants of SharePoint. And I think, again, the integration with Power Apps directly into SharePoint team sites is going to make a big difference, going to make it much easier to capture information and create that ability for customers. Now, one of the other things that Microsoft announced at that SharePoint event was an update to OneDrive, which also now will include OneDrive on demand. Now, this will come to the Creators Update when that becomes available. So OneDrive syncing tool is the ability that allows you to synchronize your data from Office 365, OneDrive and team sites to your desktop. At presently, you have the ability to do selective sync, so you can configure it to go in and select which folders it will synchronize to your desktop. The idea with Office OneDrive on demand now is that all the information will live in the cloud, and when you select a file, it will automatically download that, put that in a local location, allow you to work off it, and then synchronize those changes back up to the cloud. Now, the understanding I have is also if you don't then access a file for, say, 30 days, the local copy will be removed and it will be basically moved back to the cloud. So the idea here is you don't need to be constantly syncing information or go and manually select things. You just set up the synchronization tool, and as you work with documents and information, they will automatically be brought down to your machine, and again makes it much easier and much less hassle when it comes to working with information locally. So look out for that again with the Fall Creators Update when it becomes available. Right, another thing that we've got on the automation side is that the Microsoft Flow service. Flow is an automation tool that allows you, for example, to say once a day, take information from here and move it to somewhere else, or for example, take an attachment that comes in on an email and put it into a SharePoint document library. The surfacing of flows directly in document libraries means that you can create an automated process directly from that document library. So again, it makes it nice and easy, puts all the stuff in there for you, helps you create that automation process in a much easier way. So you'll see that appear in all your document libraries, and typically the reason I mention it is that we see a lot of questions from customers about what Flow is, what it's doing now that it's being surfaced for them in their document libraries. So again, my advice to you is to, excuse me, to be proactive, to go out there and let them know what it is, and look at using Flow yourself to automate tasks and then go and deploy those potentially to customers as well. So plenty of great options for automating businesses and saving them time and improving their productivity. Another update to SharePoint is the maximum path length has been increased. So previously there was a limit on how long a SharePoint path could be. So if you had a file in SharePoint that was in a document library that was deep down in the structure in a great range of subsites, underneath subsites, the path length could become a bit of an issue. So Microsoft has extended that from the existing 256 limit to over 400 characters now. So again, you can access and work with file paths that are now over 400 characters in length. So it's going to make it much easier if you have a very complex and deep structure. Again, best practice is obviously to keep those as short as possible, but as you can appreciate, as you have long file names and potentially long and involved subsite names, that can blow out pretty quickly. So it's good that Microsoft has now enabled that, and again, we'll increase the limits there. If you want to read the details, again, just pop into the article and you can get more details of exactly what they've changed. All right, so now let us go in and talk about some Azure updates. Now, Microsoft has basically made the Azure AD console in the resource manager, so in portal.azure.com, which you get as a CSP license, is the Azure AD console has now gone general availability, which means that you can go in there and manage your users, manage applications, do single sign-on web portal. All that sort of stuff is now available in the Resource Manager portal, making life much easier. Now remember that when you get Office 365, you do get an Azure tenant. That Azure tenant does have a limit on what can be done, so you can't by default add virtual machines to the tenant you get with Office 365 in the Azure space, but you can certainly go in and manipulate the AD and again perform a number of value add features for customers. So if you haven't had a look, go in and use your Office 365. You go into the admin area. On the bottom left hand corner, you'll see one of the areas you can manage apart from SharePoint, Exchange, whatnot, is Azure AD, and that will take you to the new portal, and you should be able to go in and see your users basically in the portal there. Alright, so we've also got something which has really made a big difference for me. So one of the things you can do is you can back up information from on-premises to what's called a recovery vault in Azure. Now you can back up files and folders, you can back up running applications like SQL databases, SharePoint, Exchange, System State and whatnot. Now when Azure first started out, they had the older Service Manager, the older portal, and that's where I set up a lot of my recovery vaults for the machines that I use. And since then, they've obviously moved to the Resource Manager, which is the newer portal. Now, at this stage, the only way used to be able to basically, if you wanted to create new recovery vaults in the Resource Manager, you basically had to start again. So that was a bit awkward if you'd built up quite a history of files and you had a retention policy and you wanted to retain that information. So made it a bit cumbersome to have two recovery vaults, one in the old portal and one in the new portal. So Microsoft now has announced that you can migrate your recovery vaults from the older portal to the newer portal, so that's going to be great. Again, the details are in that blog at this stage. You'll have to opt into that and they will organise that for you, but we see this as being probably automated down the track. But if you have recovery vaults where you've backed up Azure data, backed up into Azure in the older service portal, you can now move these across into the newer Resource Manager portal, which is really handy. Another tool that you may not know about that is inside Azure and that has been updated recently is the Azure Advisor. So what basically that will do, it will look through your subscription and make a number of recommendations. So it will talk about things like security, the performance, and it does this obviously by looking at the logs, looking at the way things have been set up. So again, it's part of Azure. It doesn't cost you anything for this analysis to be run. If you have got services in Azure, I certainly recommend that you go in and run the Azure Advisor across your tenant just to see what it does report and let you know what the best practices are. So again, think of it like a best practices analyzer for Azure. And the URL is down the bottom there if you want to pop in and give that a try. All right, another really handy feature is this pass-through authentication. So one of the challenges in the cloud is to have identity managed in a consistent way from on-premises through to the identities in Azure AD. Now, one of the challenges was to have a true single sign-on for your domain users locally, so they could just log in to a workstation, and that login would then be the same and it would auto log in for any services in the cloud. The traditional way of achieving that was around doing ADFS. Okay, so you typically had to implement ADFS, which was complex, required certificates, and also typically required additional on-prem environment. Thanks to Microsoft, they've now implemented a pass-through authentication. So what that means is you don't have to go through the setup and the tribulations of setting up ADFS. You can implement the pass-through authentication. You basically just set up your directory synchronization and the additional enhancements this provides, and you should be able to get true single sign-on from your on-prem environment. So a user can Control-Alt-Delete, log into their workstation in the morning, and that will give them access to local resources as well as their cloud resources, whether that is Office 365 services or things in Azure as well. So again, pass-through authentication is designed to give you the ability to have single sign-on across your on-prem and cloud-based systems. Mentioning the connection between the on-prem and something like Azure, Microsoft has announced the Azure On-Prem Gateway. So the thinking behind this is that you get a lot of functionality in Azure to perform tasks, things like backups, but you also get automation, things like run books, you also get Azure Functions, you also get things like logic apps, which allow you to run automation processes. Now, until the gateway was made available, you could only work with cloud assets. But if you install this gateway, it will give you the ability to not only reach into your cloud resources, but also reach across to your on-prem environment. So you can, for example, create a logic app that may move information or take action when something happens on-prem on one of your servers, and then take some action in the cloud. So it really gives us that hybrid ability to be able to automate and work with resources that are on-prem and in the cloud. The other advantage that the Azure On-Prem Gateway also gives us is it effectively is also a gateway to Power BI. So if you're looking to report on resources that are in your local environment into the Power BI environment, the Azure Gateway will give you that ability to go in and query things like your local SQL server, your local AD, and report those in Power BI. Obviously, you'll need the appropriate licensing when it comes to Power BI, but again, that's what that gateway will also provide for you. All right, so that's all the updates that I've got, and what we might do now is basically have a look at Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is a new service that Microsoft has released probably in the last 3 or so months. It's probably been in testing now for maybe 6 to 9 months, and the key thing here is that it is now turned on by default in your Office 365 tenants. So an overview of Teams is that effectively it's available in all suites that include a SharePoint license. The only place you typically don't get it is the Office 365 Business Suite, which is just the applications on the desktop. So effectively, any suite that includes SharePoint will also get a license for Teams. Now, what we also get, again, it's available even to the education SKUs, and remember, it's on by default. Now, the concept with Teams is, I suppose, a wrapper or a way for services like Exchange, SharePoint, Planner to be surfaced in one location. So I'll get into the reasons behind this, but think of it basically as when you create a team, you get an email distribution list for collaboration, you get a SharePoint team site for collaboration, you get a plan for Teams collaboration. All these things are implemented automatically for you. So again, think of it as a wrapper, a way to bring all the collaboration services of Office 365 together under one umbrella. The great thing is it also has a dedicated app which is available on all platforms. Now that means that from a user's point of view, rather than going into their emails, then popping out and going to a browser and looking at a SharePoint file and then maybe doing a plan, they can get to everything via a single app. Now that app is available on mobiles but also in the browser and on the desktop. So I've had great success implementing Teams as a stepping stone for users into something like SharePoint. It removes that complexity, makes it much easier, makes everything in one location for users to work with the information. And remember, as I mentioned, it's now enabled by default on all Office 365 tenants. If the user goes to their homepage in Office 365, they will now see a Teams icon. All right, and it is possible to go in and control the functions of Teams. You'll find that in the services area of the Office 365 admin portal. So if you want, you can go in and turn off Teams, but you can also control some of the low-level functionality if you want. Now, the concept in Teams is very different. So the way I describe it is as such. I like to divide the world that we see today into three universes: old, new, and modern. Now, in the old world, we typically had data on on-premises workstations. We did emails, and that's how we collaborated. We sent files to people. We worked on separate calendars. We still used pen and paper, and when we needed to talk to people, we would just ring them. We typically also worked in an office, so people went to an office to do work. Now what happened is that users wanted a more flexible way. They wanted to be able to access their emails anywhere where they had the internet. They wanted to be able to use voice over the internet like consumer grade Skype. They wanted the ability to share files quickly and easily using something like Dropbox. They were mobile. They wanted to be able to work from a cafe anywhere there was Wi-Fi and so on. So the users went to the IT department and asked for these tools, and typically IT said it was too difficult. They had security issues. It was not part of compliance. So then, as good users do, they bypassed IT and implemented something called Shadow IT, where they implemented all these tools themselves thanks to the free availability on the internet. So typically in many businesses we see the implementation of things like Dropbox, Facebook, to allow people to get their job done from a user's point of view. Now along came Office 365 and brought a lot of those web-based services together inside one consistent cloud. That made IT happy because they could apply compliance, and it made users happy because they got shared inboxes, they got something they could access on the web, they got SharePoint and OneDrive to access their files, which they could get to on mobile apps and relatively share those with others. They also got cool tools like Skype for Business, Yammer, Planner, Power BI, and so on. But there's still a bit of a challenge here. The challenge was if a user wanted their own dedicated SharePoint site, they had to go out or ask IT to implement it for them. They had to build it themselves. And again, it was a little bit standalone. They didn't understand SharePoint, where the files go, and it made it a bit difficult. So they had better tools, but they still weren't quite as easily to access and implement as users wanted. So the thinking was that Microsoft implemented Teams. So what Teams gives people when they implement a team is it will give them an immediate Exchange distribution list. It will give them a shared calendar for everybody who is a team member. It will give them a dedicated SharePoint site. It will give them a chat facility, much like we see with Skype. It will give them a group plan and access to things like Power BI. Now, all a user has to do to create a team is give the team a name. As soon as they give the team a name, those items that you see there will all be automatically created. So they'll get the email list, they'll get the SharePoint site, they'll get a chat channel, and so on. So this is the big thing with Teams, is when you create a team, the user doesn't have to know anything more than giving the name of the team. Everything else is created behind the covers. Now again, maybe it's overkill, but the thinking here is you know what, if you want a team and maybe just want to do chat, sure, you might not want a SharePoint website immediately, but Teams is going to give you one just in case. All right. So now what we see is we see a shift in control from the area where the IT admin had everything, they controlled everything, they called the shots, to a world now where the user provisions their team and they provision all the services automatically without needing to go to IT. We also basically see that data is moved from a very structured environment, so it was in F, customers, years, so on, to a very much ad hoc environment. You know, admin creates a team, marketing creates a team, project creates a team. The data isn't living in a structured manner. The last item here is the access, right? So again, it's moved from a linear access where again, you go from top to bottom, you work through your inbox, to very much a parallel world. You're part of multiple teams. You're going in and out of multiple SharePoint document libraries. You're working with multiple areas at the same time rather than doing single things. So what we see here as an example on screen is the Teams mobile app. So for example, I have a number of teams there: help desk, patron, sales, and for example the NSA. Now inside the NSA one, you'll see I have a number of channels. Now those channels are general announcements, executive branch, and social media. Each one of those channels on the right, you can see, has their own ability to have chats, right? So for example, if you had announcements, you could announce everything in that and people would be able to choose whether to consume that. You'll also notice across the top that not only do I get conversations, but I also get a location to put files, projects, and I can push and add more tabs across the page. So again, think of it like the ability for the user to create this area, and the good thing for them is they work inside this app. They can still see their activity, they can chat with individuals, work within their teams, look at their meetings and their files. So again, they don't need to be moving around lots and lots of applications. The Teams app gives them the wrapper over the top of all that to make it easy for them. And what I think, and again, so the idea here is that, as you can see, is when you create a team, in this case we created a team called NSA, that automatically creates a full-blown SharePoint site, a full-blown project area in Office 365. Now the users may not use that initially, but it's there for them. It's built on that technology. So Teams is built on what Office 365 already provides. It just brings it together in an easy way for users to get started. So the idea is they start maybe with a basic interface and just upload files, and they may grow into a complete SharePoint site. Now again, this can make management, IT, admin a bit more challenging because again, it has been optimized for the user experience rather than the administrator. But the takeaway is that it is basically, Teams is built on SharePoint. Teams is built on Exchange Online. It's not something completely different, just a wrapper around it. And I think one of the biggest features or biggest advantages is the mobile app. So I've got the mobile app here from iOS. You'll see that it looks very similar to what you see on the web. It's easy for users to get to their files, easy for the users to get to their chat. So we've had great success implementing Teams where users go out and they have chats, they take photos, they post them into the conversation link, and they basically improve their productivity by reducing the emails and getting a much faster reaction if they need assistance out in the field. So again, don't overlook the power that the mobile app will give you. The other thing with Teams is that when Microsoft announced it, there are probably a lot of features that weren't available. One of the features that currently isn't available is the ability for users to share this with external parties. Okay, so the idea here is, for example, if you have an Office 365 group, right, you can share that with external users. If you have Yammer, you can share that with external users. So one of the things Teams currently doesn't support is the ability to share with external users. But if you look at the roadmap, Microsoft have committed to making that available in a very short term. And since it has been released, Teams has upgraded a number of times and added a number of additional features. So again, look for this product to continue to improve and continue to be enhanced with features. So again, we're very, very keen, and we're seeing a lot of uptake and especially a lot of customer engagement when it comes to using Teams. So my takeaways are, as we're winding up, is Microsoft Teams is a different way of collaborating. It's not linear. It's not an intranet. Again, it's a combination of social, a combination of intranet, a combination of chat using things like Skype for Business. All right. Again, the whole idea here is it enables users to get on with their job, to create what they need, to enable the services that they need, and going to provide them benefit for the productivity for the job they need to do. Some of the challenges that we can see are around naming conventions. So if you have users creating teams and they create them with the same names, again, we can get confusion. You can overcome that, but again, if we put the control in the hands of the users, we need to be very careful there. Backup and recovery, again, is something you need to look at and consider. Again, it's not a linear environment. You have users creating teams. Where are the documents? How are they being enforced? Who's got permissions to them? Again, the challenges fall back to the IT people to sit down and work this sort of stuff out. Again, users are enabling this because they can. All right, and as I indicated, the experience I have in the market is showing Microsoft Teams to customers. It resonates with them, they like it, they want it implemented, and many people are adopting it very quickly. And I think that's because it puts a simplified interface over the collaboration in Office 365. It reduces the complexity of setting things up in silos and trying to link them together. Teams does that for you. You just name the team, it creates all the resources for you, links them all together, and then puts a nice simplified wrapper over the top to make it really easy for users to work on. All right, so hopefully that's given you a better indication or an idea. If you haven't looked at Teams, go in and have a play. Have a look at the resources that I have given you there. Plenty of information that you can look on. But the main thing I would suggest to you is if you haven't looked at Teams, go and look at your partner tenant, go in and have a play with it, and again, get up to speed with it, because I'm pretty sure you'll find that there are customers out there who are using it, who really like it, and they're going to need your support on that product. All right, Craig, well, I think with that, I'm done.